The air in my aunt's mansion reeked of old money and condescension. As my cousins bragged about their latest triumphs, a familiar question echoed. "Still just an assistant, dear?" They had no idea the empire I'd secretly built was about to collide with their carefully constructed world. The crystal glasses on the mahogany table glittered under the chandelier light, each reflection a tiny spark in the suffocatingly opulent dining room. My Aunt Eleanor's annual summer barbecue was in full swing, a tradition less about family bonding and more about showcasing the latest acquisitions, be it a new sports car, a sprawling vacation home, or a freshly minted Ivy League degree. The air hung heavy with the cloying scent of expensive perfume and the barely concealed air of superiority that clung to my relatives like a second skin. I stood near the French doors leading to the manicured gardens, nursing a glass of iced tea and observing the familiar spectacle. My cousins, all impeccably dressed and radiating an almost aggressive confidence, were locked in their usual competition for attention, each anecdote carefully crafted to highlight their latest professional or personal triumph. My own simple navy dress, chosen for its ability to help me fade into the background, felt less like clothing and more like a shield against their inevitable judgment. "There you are, Amelia." Aunt Eleanor's voice, sharp and perfectly enunciated, sliced through the cheerful din. I almost hadn't seen her approaching, her perfectly coiffed silver hair catching the light. "Still with that little administrative job, dear?" I took a small sip of my iced tea, a faint smile playing on my lips. "Actually, I was recently promoted to executive assistant." Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction. "Oh, how lovely. Still at that... What was the name of that small consulting firm again? Phoenix? Something?" "Phoenix Solutions," I replied, keeping my tone even. My cousin Charles, ever the eager participant in any opportunity to subtly belittle me, sauntered over, a half-empty glass of red wine in his hand. "Come on, Amelia. You could do so much better. I could put in a word at my firm. We're always looking for bright young things, in actual roles with career progression, you know?" I thought of the stack of crucial documents waiting for my signature back at my actual office, not the small, deliberately unassuming space I let my family believe was my professional hub. "I appreciate the offer, Charles, but I'm quite happy where I am." Aunt Eleanor let out a tinkling laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Darling, you have so much potential. Your cousins are all managers, directors, making real strides in their respective fields, and you're still assisting. It's a shame to see it go to waste." If only they knew. If only they had the slightest inkling that the Phoenix Solutions, where I supposedly spent my days filing and answering phones, was, in reality, my creation. The story of how I built my company in secret had its roots in this very house, almost a decade ago. I was fresh out of business school, armed with an MBA and a vision for transforming struggling businesses. I had spent months perfecting my pitch, naively believing that my family's extensive network of connections would be my launching pad. Instead, I was met with laughter and thinly veiled condescension. "Consulting? Leave that to the big boys, Amelia." Uncle Richard had scoffed, his booming voice echoing through the very room I now stood in. "Why don't you join the family business? Start in the marketing department, work your way up. That's the proper way to build a career." The proper way, of course, meant following the well-trodden path laid out for the male heirs of the family fortune. Women were expected to marry well or occupy supportive, non-executive positions. Nothing more. That night, amidst the glittering chandeliers and the suffocating weight of expectation, I made 2 silent vows that would irrevocably alter the course of my life. First, I would build my own empire, entirely independent of their help or knowledge. Second, I would make them regret every single dismissive word. Phoenix Solutions was born from that quiet act of rebellion, a seed of defiance planted in the fertile ground of their underestimation. Phoenix Solutions began in a cramped, windowless office above a bustling dry cleaners. My meager savings barely covered the first month's rent, but I possessed something far more valuable than capital: a deep understanding of how businesses functioned, why they faltered, and, most importantly, how to revive them. My first client was a small family-owned printing company teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. The owner, a kind but overwhelmed man named Mr. Henderson, had been turned away by every major consulting firm in the city. They deemed his company too far gone, a lost cause. I spent the next 3 months immersed in their operations, meticulously analyzing their processes, streamlining their workflow, and negotiating with their increasingly impatient creditors. I worked tirelessly, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the burning desire to prove my family wrong. 6 months later, Henderson Printing was not only solvent but profitable, its future secured. Word of this quiet success began to circulate within the local business community. Whispers of a mysterious, small consulting firm that possessed an uncanny ability to resurrect dying companies. As Phoenix Solutions' reputation grew, slowly but steadily, I began to hire. I was meticulous in my selection process, seeking out individuals who shared not only my vision, but also my unwavering commitment to discretion. Every employee, from the junior analysts to the senior strategists, signed airtight non-disclosure agreements. My name never appeared on any public documents. No grand announcements were made. I remained the silent architect, the unseen hand guiding the company's ascent. Even as Phoenix Solutions expanded, outgrowing the tiny office above the dry cleaners and eventually moving into a sleek, modern headquarters downtown, I maintained my carefully constructed facade. When family members inquired about my job at their lavish gatherings, I would offer vague descriptions of mundane administrative tasks, watching their eyes glaze over with polite disinterest. The deception wasn't solely driven by pride, it was a strategic necessity. The Wilson family's business empire was built on the aggressive acquisition of struggling companies at rock-bottom prices. Phoenix Solutions, with its focus on saving those same companies before they became vulnerable to hostile takeovers, was a direct threat to their predatory practices. We operated in the shadows, quietly and effectively thwarting their ambitions while simultaneously building our own success. Now, 10 years had passed since that pivotal family reunion. Phoenix Solutions had become a formidable force in the consulting industry, boasting offices in 12 major cities, a client roster that included Fortune 500 corporations, and an unparalleled reputation for transforming failing businesses into thriving enterprises. And still, not a single one of my smug, self-satisfied relatives had the faintest idea that the unassuming assistant they occasionally encountered at family gatherings was the driving force behind it all. "More iced tea, dear?" Aunt Eleanor's voice, though laced with her usual condescension, pulled me back to the present. "Or perhaps you should stick to water. I imagine your salary doesn't leave much room for expensive tastes." I accepted the offered glass with a practiced smile. "Thank you, Aunt Eleanor. How is Uncle Richard's latest venture going? Global Tech Industries, wasn't it?" Her smile faltered ever so slightly, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "There have been some complications. Nothing Richard can't handle, of course." What she didn't know was that those complications were entirely of my making. Global Tech Industries had been the prime target of Uncle Richard's latest hostile takeover attempt. They had reached out to Phoenix Solutions 3 months prior, desperate for help. Now, they were in the final stages of implementing our comprehensive restructuring plan, their stock price steadily climbing, effectively dismantling Uncle Richard's carefully laid plans. "I heard they hired some consulting firm," Cousin Charles chimed in, swirling the remaining wine in his glass. "Probably throwing good money after bad. Those consultants are all the same, big promises, no real results." I offered another polite smile, resisting the urge to point out that Phoenix Solutions' fee for saving Global Tech Industries was more than Charles would likely earn in the next 5 years at his prestigious law firm. "Oh, which firm was it?" Aunt Eleanor mused, tapping a perfectly manicured nail against her chin. "Something ordinary sounding, I believe." "Phoenix Solutions," I supplied casually. Charles waved a dismissive hand. "Never heard of them. Probably some fly-by-night operation. Dad says their CEO won't even show their face. Probably some trust fund kid playing at business." Just then, my phone buzzed discreetly in my small clutch. A message from Sarah, my executive assistant. Emergency meeting tomorrow, 9 o'clock a.m. Wilson Enterprises representatives requesting merger discussion. Global Tech Industries. Urgent response needed. I reread the message twice, a wave of satisfaction washing over me. They were finally admitting defeat with Global Tech. Having failed in their attempt to acquire the company outright, they were now seeking a merger, a move that would require the explicit approval of Global Tech's consulting firm. My firm. Tomorrow morning, my family would walk into a conference room expecting to strong-arm their way into a favorable deal. Instead, they would find themselves face-to-face with the assistant they had dismissed for the past decade. Except this time, I wouldn't be bringing coffee. I would be sitting at the head of the table. "Everything all right, dear?" Aunt Eleanor asked, noticing my momentary distraction. I finished my iced tea and gave her my brightest, most insincere smile. "Perfect, actually. I should probably head home early. Big meeting tomorrow." "Oh, taking notes for some important executive?" Charles quipped, a smirk playing on his lips. "Something like that," I replied, already mentally planning my attire for the next day. Something impactful. Something exactly like that. The next morning, the reflection staring back at me from the polished steel doors of the executive elevator was a stark contrast to the understated figure from the previous evening. Gone was the simple navy dress. In its place was a tailored charcoal pantsuit, the sharp lines and dark color exuding an aura of quiet power. It was a power move, meticulously planned. My assistant, Sarah, waited just outside the elevator doors, a tablet clutched in her hand and a knowing smile on her face. "The Wilson Enterprises team arrived early as expected," she reported as we walked briskly towards the main conference room. "Your uncle seems particularly anxious to meet Phoenix Solutions' CEO." "I'm sure he is," I murmured, pausing briefly to check my reflection in a glass wall. "Perfect. Are they all in the main conference room?" "Yes, along with Mr. Thompson from Global Tech Industries." Sarah's eyes sparkled with anticipation. "And your cousin Charles is there too. Apparently, he insisted on handling the legal aspects personally." I smiled inwardly, remembering Charles's condescending offer of a real job just yesterday. Who else from the family made the trip? "Your Aunt Eleanor came along, ostensibly as moral support, though she's not officially part of the meeting. And your cousin David is representing Wilson Enterprises' finance department." A perfect audience. I glanced at my watch, 8:57 a.m. "Have they been offered refreshments?" "Your aunt complained rather loudly about the lack of anyone to serve coffee." Sarah's grin widened. I informed them that the executive assistant would be in shortly. I almost laughed aloud. For 10 years, I had played the role of the invisible support staff whenever family members deigned to visit the office. They never truly saw me, never looked closely at the quiet woman who brought their coffee or took their coats. It had been the perfect camouflage. "Give me 2 minutes," I said to Sarah, my voice calm and steady. "Then, bring in the contracts." I could hear the muffled sounds of voices through the conference room's heavy oak doors. Uncle Richard's authoritative tone, Aunt Eleanor's sharp, distinctive laugh, Charles's smug commentary. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the doors open. The conversation within the room ceased abruptly. My uncle sat at the head of the long, imposing table, having clearly assumed the position of power. Charles and David flanked him, both clad in expensive suits that screamed inherited wealth. Aunt Eleanor perched nearby, meticulously examining her manicure with an air of practiced boredom. Mr. Thompson, the CEO of Global Tech Industries, sat alone on the opposite side, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Finally!" Aunt Eleanor sighed dramatically, then her gaze landed on me, her words trailing off. She actually looked at me, truly looked at me, for perhaps the first time in years. "Amelia, what are you wearing? And why aren't you carrying coffee?" I walked calmly to the head of the table, the seat directly opposite Uncle Richard. "I don't serve coffee anymore, Aunt Eleanor. In fact, I never really did." "What is this?" Uncle Richard demanded, his face already beginning to redden. "Where is Phoenix Solutions' CEO? We were promised a meeting with the actual decision-maker. You have been, I stated, sitting down and savoring the look of utter confusion that spread across their faces. I am the CEO of Phoenix Solutions. I have been since I founded the company 10 years ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Charles's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish out of water. David's pen clattered onto the polished tabletop. Aunt Eleanor's perfectly maintained composure finally cracked, a look of bewildered shock replacing her usual air of superiority. Uncle Richard recovered first, his face hardening into a mask of disbelief and anger. "This is absurd! You're a secretary." "No," I said calmly, my voice carrying an unexpected weight in the silent room. "That was a cover. A very effective one, apparently, since none of you ever bothered to look past it. You were so convinced I was incapable of success that you never noticed I already was." As if on cue, Sarah entered the room carrying a thick stack of meticulously prepared contracts. She distributed them efficiently around the table, then took her place standing subtly behind my chair. "These documents," I continued, gesturing to the contracts, "outline the terms under which Phoenix Solutions will consider approving the merger between Wilson Enterprises and Global Tech Industries." "Consider approving?" Charles sputtered, his face flushed. "You can't be serious. This is a joke, right? Some kind of elaborate prank?" I reached for my phone and projected Phoenix Solutions' latest financial statements onto the large screen on the wall. Phoenix Solutions currently manages over $12 billion in client assets. We have a 94% success rate in corporate restructuring, and our approval is required for any major changes to Global Tech Industries' business structure. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile as I watched the stunned expressions of my relatives. "Does that look like a joke to you?" "This is impossible," Aunt Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "You're nothing. You've always been nothing." "That's exactly what you were meant to think," I replied, my gaze unwavering. I turned to Mr. Thompson. "Mr. Thompson, would you care to explain to my family why you chose Phoenix Solutions over Wilson Enterprises' original offer?" Mr. Thompson straightened in his chair, a newfound confidence in his demeanor. "Phoenix Solutions' reputation is unparalleled. When Wilson Enterprises attempted their hostile takeover, Phoenix Solutions' restructuring plan was instrumental in saving our company. We've increased profits by 47% since implementing their strategies." "Restructuring plan?" David looked as though he might faint. "The plan that destroyed our acquisition attempt. That was you?" "Among others," I confirmed, ticking off cases on my fingers. "Peterson Electronics, which you tried to acquire last year. Maritime Shipping, which you underbid on last quarter. The Davidson Group, which mysteriously recovered just before you could buy them out." I leaned forward slightly, my gaze sweeping across their shocked faces. "For 10 years, I've been quietly undermining every predatory acquisition attempt your company has made." Uncle Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "You deliberately sabotaged family business." "No," I corrected him, my voice firm. "I built my own business, one that helps companies survive instead of devouring them for parts. The fact that it interfered with your plans was merely a karmic bonus." "This is ridiculous," Charles declared, pushing his chair back and standing up abruptly. "I'm calling our lawyers." "Sit down, Charles," I said, my voice carrying an unexpected authority that made him freeze mid-motion. "You really should read those contracts in front of you, the ones your firm spent months trying to secure for this meeting." I watched as realization dawned on his face. "That's right. Your law firm's biggest client this year? That was me too." Sarah stepped forward, placing another document on the table. "This is a summary of Phoenix Solutions' current market position and liquid assets. You'll note that we're now in a position to acquire controlling interest in Wilson Enterprises, should we choose to do so." The room erupted in chaos. Aunt Eleanor was practically hyperventilating. David was frantically checking numbers on his phone. Charles had collapsed back into his chair, looking utterly shell-shocked. "This is blackmail!" Uncle Richard growled, his fists clenched on the table. "No," I said quietly, meeting his furious gaze. "This is business. The kind you taught me I'd never be capable of handling." I stood up, smoothing the lapels of my jacket. "You have until 5 o'clock this afternoon to review the merger terms. They're very generous, considering our current position. If you decline, Phoenix Solutions will begin purchasing Wilson Enterprises stock on the open market tomorrow morning." I headed for the door, then paused, turning back to face my stunned family. "Oh, and Aunt Eleanor, that iced tea you so graciously offered me last night? I own the tea plantation that produces it. Bought it last year. And the coffee you were so desperate for this morning? That chain too." I smiled sweetly. Turns out my salary does leave room for expensive tastes after all. The heavy oak door closed behind me, leaving them in their stunned silence. In my private office, I finally allowed myself a moment to process the extraordinary events that had just transpired. 10 years of careful deception, of playing the invisible underachiever, had culminated in this moment. Maya appeared with a real cup of coffee, my favorite blend from my own coffee chain. Was it worth the wait? I thought, gazing out at the city skyline. I remembered all the times I'd served coffee in this very office, watching my family dismiss me, underestimate me, write me off as nothing more than a secretary. Every single second had been worth it. My phone buzzed incessantly, messages already flooding in from family members who must have somehow heard about the morning's meeting. I silenced it without looking. They would have plenty of time to process their new reality. Right now, I had an empire to run, and for the first time in 10 years, I could finally do it without hiding who I really was. The next 48 hours unfolded exactly as you might expect when a family built on power and appearances suddenly discovers they're no longer at the top of the food chain. The messages started pouring in almost immediately after the meeting. "Aunt Eleanor, darling Amelia, let's discuss this over lunch. You always were my favorite niece. Charles." "Come on, Amelia, we were just joking around. Family should stick together." David. "You can't do this to us, Amelia. We're blood." I ignored them all, focusing instead on the rapid-fire emails from Wilson Enterprises board members. They weren't stupid. They could see which way the wind was blowing. By noon, they had scheduled an emergency board meeting. By 3, they had voted to accept Phoenix Solutions' merger terms. Uncle Richard, predictably, didn't go quietly. "You've betrayed this family!" His voice echoed through my office as he barged in unannounced. Maya moved to intervene, but I waved her off. Let him have his moment. "Actually," I said, not looking up from my computer, "I'd say I learned from this family. Isn't this exactly what you taught us? Seize power, eliminate competition, never show weakness?" "We gave you everything," he sputtered, his face contorted with rage. That made me laugh. "You gave me nothing. Less than nothing. You taught me that I would never be good enough, that my only value was in supporting the men in the family. So, I built something better. By deceiving everyone for a decade, I finally looked up at him. By letting you deceive yourselves, you saw exactly what you expected to see. A quiet, unambitious woman who knew her place. That was your mistake, not mine." The fight seemed to drain out of him suddenly. He sank into one of my visitor chairs, looking older and more defeated than I had ever seen him. "Why reveal yourself now? You could have continued operating in secret." "Because it was time." I closed my laptop. Global Tech Industries isn't the only company you're trying to acquire. There's Thomson Electronics, Maritime Solutions, at least 3 others. Companies with good people, solid products, that just need help restructuring. I'm tired of watching you destroy them. "It's business," he protested weakly. "No, it's greed. And it stops now." I handed him a folder. "These are the final merger terms. Phoenix Solutions will acquire a controlling interest in Wilson Enterprises. We'll restructure the company to focus on building businesses up, not tearing them down. You can stay on as a consultant if you accept the new direction. If not, your golden parachute is outlined on page 3. He opened the folder with trembling hands. "You thought of everything." "I learned from this best," I smiled without warmth, though not in the way you intended. After he left, Maya brought in a stack of newspapers. Phoenix Solutions revelation was already making headlines. Secret CEO revealed how one woman built a billion-dollar empire in secret. Wilson family shocked by hidden success story they never saw coming. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message that actually mattered. My mother, who had divorced Uncle Richard's brother years ago and distanced herself from the Wilson family's toxicity, had sent a single line: "I always knew you would show them." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of changes. Wilson Enterprises board enthusiastically embraced Phoenix Solutions' new direction. Their stock price jumped 40% on the announcement of the merger. Companies that had once feared the Wilson name now sought partnerships. The press couldn't get enough of the story. Aunt Eleanor tried to spin it as a heartwarming family success story. "We always knew Amelia had potential," she told one reporter. "This just proves that the Wilson spirit of entrepreneurship runs in the blood." I responded by releasing archived video footage from last year's family reunion, where she had spent 20 minutes explaining to everyone why I would never amount to anything. The footage went viral. She stopped giving interviews after that. Charles attempted damage control in his own way, claiming he had been in on it all along. Unfortunately for him, too many people had witnessed his shocked face in that conference room. His law firm's other clients began questioning his judgment. Within a month, he was quietly asked to take a leave of absence. David adapted the fastest, approaching me with a business proposal just 2 weeks after the revelation. "We could dominate the market together," he suggested over an awkward lunch. "The Wilson-Phoenix alliance would be unstoppable." "That's not what Phoenix Solutions is about," I told him. "We don't dominate, we elevate." The real changes came in the quieter moments. The young intern who tearfully thanked me for showing her that success didn't require compromising her principles. The female executives who started reaching out, sharing their own stories of being underestimated. The business schools that invited me to speak about building ethical success in a cutthroat world. 3 months after the revelation, I stood on a stage accepting the Business Innovation Award. Looking out at the audience, I saw my mother sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. Behind her sat several of my former administrative assistants, all women who had helped maintain my cover while building their own careers within Phoenix Solutions. "Success isn't about who has the most power," I told the crowd. "It's about how you use the power you have." For 10 years, I played a role that made powerful people underestimate me. I could have revealed myself sooner, but I chose to wait until Phoenix Solutions was strong enough to create real change. The applause was thunderous, but the real satisfaction came later that evening. I was working late in my office when Maya brought in an interesting piece of news. Uncle Richard had just announced his retirement. His resignation letter included an unexpected paragraph. My niece taught me that true business success isn't measured in acquisitions or assets, but in the positive impact we create. I regret that it took losing control of my company to learn this lesson. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about the long game I had played. 10 years of careful planning, of swallowing pride and playing small, had led to this moment. Phoenix Solutions wasn't just successful, it was changing how business was done. The next family reunion would certainly be interesting. I planned to host it myself, in Phoenix Solutions' main conference room, the same room where I had served coffee countless times, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to show them who I really was. Maya knocked on my door. "Your 4 o'clock is here. The CEO of Thompson Electronics, the company your uncle was trying to acquire." I smiled. "Show them in, Maya. And Maya, bring coffee for everyone. The good stuff from our chain." As I stood to greet my visitors, I caught my reflection in the window. No more hiding, no more playing small. I had built something remarkable, not despite my family's dismissal, but because of it. They had taught me that power doesn't always look like what people expect. Sometimes it looks like a quiet woman in a simple navy dress, serving coffee and taking notes while building an empire right under everyone's nose. The tabloids called it revenge. The business papers called it strategic genius. But for me, it was simply justice served, one corporate takeover at a time, with a side of perfectly brewed coffee. And somewhere in a small office above a dry cleaner's, my original desk still sits. I keep it as a reminder that success doesn't always wear designer labels or demand attention. Sometimes it works quietly, patiently, building something extraordinary while the world looks the other way. That's the real secret to success, not the power you show, but the power you build when no one's watching.